It's been a long time coming. Oh man, do these guys not know who they're dealing with? Do they not know that I have been aggressively debunking this nonsense for a solid decade? Right? Like, these people are the reason why I am so anti Nintendo YouTuber, because they just flagrantly just make things up, try to pass off their experiences as the objective reality, and desperately try and make it seem like Nintendo was in a bad place a decade ago. When they were putting out, huge bangers like 3D Pokemon, you know, like there was so much good stuff coming out in the Wii U and 3DS era. And you're seeing the same kind of historical revisionism that we saw during the GameCube and the N64 era and the Wii, where people try to tell you that, like, well, actually, everybody I knew hated Nintendo and thought it was lame. Like, they're trying to do the same with the Wii U, but the difference now being that there are people willing to stand up for the Wii U. People who are willing to acknowledge that all of the arguments lobbied against this thing are complete bunk. People like me, absolute chads, absolute legends, who will look Scott the Waz in the face and call him a faggot, right? We are the Nintendo fan base. Okay? Like, we are not going to stand for this nonsense anymore, right? This, to me, the fact that so many gaming YouTubers came out like coping and seething in regards to like the very real realization that the Wii U is very fondly remembered among the general population really showcases the mindset they're in, right? When it comes to covering the Wii U, right? They were very adamant that this console was a failure, that it did nothing right, that Nintendo dropped the ball on this situation, that the Wii U was an objective failure by all metrics. But they failed to understand that the Wii U generation was the period in which Nintendo established its first party developers as being objectively superior to their PlayStation counterparts. Up to this point, there was this very big like back and forth among the community, like whether or not PlayStation was better than Nintendo, and usually you favored the whatever one you had at home, right? But the Nintendo one, that generation, the Wii U, is the one that solidified that Nintendo's exclusives were better than the competition, right? Nintendo by themselves were carrying this entire console, right? Right off the gate with that first year, we had an excellent library of games. We got New Super Mario Bros. U, Nintendo Land, Rayman Legends, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, Pikmin 3, The Wonderful 101, one of my favorite games of all time. Capping it off with Super Mario 3D World, which is a lot of people's favorite Mario game, but I personally don't care that much. Like, I realized when I was like looking through my list of all these great Wii U games I could have talked about for that first year, that Mario 3D World is probably my least favorite. But that's how good the Wii U library was, right? The Mario game was overshadowed by all the other good things that year. The thing is, though, the Wii U had a reputation right out of the gate. Why? What was the issue with the Wii U? Now, people will try to tell you it had something to do with the console or the launch lineup or the controller or something. That is not true at all, right? What happened with the Wii U is that game journalists, in a desperate attempt to downplay the Nintendo brand, created this narrative that the console was an add-on, right? And we all know this was a narrative that was pulled out of whole cloth because everyone knew there was going to be a new console announcement that year. You can look back through the Wayback Machine and see that like there were lots of articles about this. Nintendo was like emphasizing that there would be a new console this year. Like the idea that like the Wii U was a confusing console is just ridiculous. Like they made it very clear what they were doing. Like the confusion should have been cleared up like that day. But in reality, the gaming press is very very biased towards Sony. That is the reality of the situation. People like to ignore this, but that is the reality, is that they were desperately trying to not have a repeat of the Wii. Because we saw this during the Wii era too, where the Wii came out of nowhere. it completely obliterated the PS3, and they had to spend that entire generation like downplaying the success of the Wii, downplaying the DS. Like we were told the Wii was on the way out since like what 2008. Like oh, it's not that popular anymore. Oh, it doesn't have that many games. Like the whole not having many games argument is like a holdover from the Wii era, right? And a big reason why that narrative, the narrative never really took off for the Wii because everybody already bought it. Everybody already had a Wii. People were already buying all the games they were interested in. Like there was no downplaying the Wii at any point during its life cycle. But a lot of that negative feeling, all that negative publicity, all of that like propaganda carried over to the Wii U. Right, the reason why people were so down on the Wii U because every single game journalism outlet for the past several years had been downplaying every Nintendo product on the market. You know, they downplayed the Wii, they downplayed the GameCube, they downplayed the N64, right? This was like a staple. So Iwata, the genius, the mastermind, he realized that game journalists were not doing their job. They were not covering the games. They were not like telling people about like all this amazing stuff coming out on Nintendo hardware. So he created the Nintendo Direct format. And for those of you who don't remember what happened when that format was introduced, everybody called it insane. You know, game journalists declared Nintendo to be a failure. They were abandoning the press conference system. Like they would not be able to. They would fail. Right? They were doomed to failure. And before the Nintendo Directs took off, before they became super popular, that was the case. Right? Game journalists were not covering the Nintendo games, and Nintendo was producing these Nintendo Directs to an audience that didn't necessarily know they existed yet. Like I think they started like being produced in like 2010 or something, but then they didn't start like gaining momentum until like 2014 or so. So like it was like 4 years of like switching over their primary publication method to this like new Nintendo Direct format, right? People weren't on board with this new thing right off the bat. So for a while there, game journalists were able to like completely manipulate the perception of Nintendo, right? You know, Nintendo Power, they folded the magazine because they didn't want it interfering with the Nintendo Direct format. But like the corrupt third party ones, the ones controlled by like Sony, were actively going against Nintendo. Like it had nothing to do with the Wii U. Yeah, they were slamming every single Nintendo product that came out. Like remember when like the PSP outsold the DS, and then like the DS goes on to be like the best selling console ever. Like it's stuff like that, right? You know, we were told over and over again, like, oh, the PlayStation Vita is gonna outperform the 3DS. Didn't happen, right? Like this stuff is very, very commonplace. Like the Wii U specifically was put in this very particular position, a very specific position, where it had to deal with years of buildup of bad rep from game journalists, like holdovers from the Wii, into the next generation, right? And Nintendo, the audience wasn't completely aware of the the newsletter shift to Nintendo Direct. So like people simply didn't know about the console. And like game journalists did everything they possibly could to not talk about it and instead prop up like a lesser product, the PlayStation 4, right? So for that generation, people were like, buying PS4s. They were, waiting for the games, waiting. And they were just sitting there thinking that like, wait, where are the games? Meanwhile, like Nintendo fans were like swamped with games all throughout that life cycle, right? Mario Kart 8 in 2014, which became a huge hit. Splatoon in 2015, right, which became a major new Nintendo IP. Star Fox Zero, the game of the year for 2016. Like we were just bombarded with games up until the release of The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, one of the best games ever made, and a game that was originally planned to be a Wii U exclusive. Right, the Wii U objectively was a huge success because of the high quality product that Nintendo offered with it, right? Because of the smart decision they made getting away from traditional game journalism outlets with the Nintendo Directs. Like by the time the Switch came out, people were on board with the Nintendo Direct format. Everybody knew about it, and it was getting very increasingly difficult for the game journalists to negatively control the image of Nintendo, especially in the era that brought us social media and Gamergate. More people than ever were aware that game journalists were maliciously trying to downplay legitimately good products in order to push their agenda, and not always political ones. I do think that is a mistake that Gamergate often makes, is that like they don't understand that Sony is the preferred platform holder for these people. So like again, like this is my point, like about the Wii U. Everybody like does like everyone seems to just refuse to acknowledge this. Like the Wii U was not a bad product. It did not have bad games. E3 2015 was a great show. Seeing people continue to bitch about that today is just laughable to me, because all of those games they showed in that direct, Star Fox Zero, Mario and Luigi Paper Jam, like they were just fantastic. They were it was a genuinely good show. We've had worse directs in the past couple of years for the Nintendo Switch. The difference being that people have people are more willing to give the Switch slack, honestly, because until just recently, if you actively tried to make fun of the Switch, people would call you out for being a fanboy. But we're kind of reaching the point where people have like convinced themselves that the Switch is going to be replaced soon. So like we're in this like period where people are more willing to acknowledge more willing to accept like criticisms of the Switch or the hardware or whatever, because it's been on the market for a while. Like again, like I don't want to come out and say the Switch is like a perfect piece of hardware, because nothing's perfect, right? But at the same time, I think the Wii U was better than the Switch, honestly. Like I thought it had more unique games. I thought it took more risks. I thought like it had more interesting spins on classic franchises. It had more things I cared about. Tropical Freeze, The Wonderful 101. Like, you don't really get games like that on the Switch. So, like the big takeaway I want to give to people, like before Scott the Woz releases his like propaganda video trying to convince you that like the Wii U failed because of Nintendo's actions. Like, let's be real here for a second. Like, the product was good. Okay, the fact that you're so desperate to try and convince people that it was a failure or that you were disappointed by it, to me, it just spells out that you were never a fan. Okay, like I find it very difficult to believe that you would enjoy the Wii, you would enjoy the 3DS, you would enjoy the Switch, but you wouldn't enjoy the Wii U, right? I think the Wii U was such a well-rounded, interesting console that anybody who put any serious time and effort into it would have found plenty of good games to enjoy.